Hi, welcome to Train Signal. My name's Bill and this lesson is Configure the Office Web App Server. In this lesson I'm going to show you how to set up and install the Web App Server and then how to configure SharePoint to use it. We're going to have a lot of fun in this lesson, so why don't we go ahead and let's get started. Now you may be asking yourself, what is the Office Web App Server? Well, the Office Web App Server, it's a server product and it allows for the viewing and editing of Office files by your users in a browser, specifically Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, and Excel files. The Office Web App Server works with SharePoint 2013, Link Server 2013, and Exchange Server 2013. But because this is a SharePoint course, we're only going to be concerned with making it work with our SharePoint server that we have been spending this entire course getting up and running. Now you may be familiar with the Office web apps in SharePoint 2010, which were installed right on your SharePoint server and essentially offered the same functionality as we're talking about here. The difference is, with the new Office web app server that we're talking about and that we're going to show you how to configure for SharePoint, it's a separate standalone product. It has to be installed on its own server. It cannot be installed on that SharePoint server or the Exchange server or the Link server. It is its own server. It's part of its own server farm. And I also want to mention that your SharePoint needs to be using claims authentication. If for some reason you're still using the classic authentication, you will not be able to install the Office web apps. And we're going to install it on one server, but it has the ability to go ahead and be installed on multiple servers if you need it to for your organization. And it all depends on your organizational needs, the size of your organization, how many users you're going to have, how many licenses you have. But for our case, we only need it to be on one server for our SharePoint farm, because remember, we've got a very, very small farm, and let's be honest, I'm the only user. Having the Office Web App Server as its own standalone product has a lot of benefits. It's easier to deploy. It's easier to manage. You can update it separately from the way you would update SharePoint. And it's also going to allow you to view Office files that are stored outside of your SharePoint server. With the new Office Web App Server, you also have improved capabilities across multiple platforms. Let me show you. When used in conjunction with SharePoint, our Office Web App Server supports editing and viewing on both PCs and Macs, and you can see here we have support for Internet Explorer, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. And on tablets and slates, tablets using Windows 8 and iOS. And just a quick note, if you want to be able to edit, that version of iOS needs to be 5.1 or higher. Older versions will only allow you to read, but not edit. The Office Web App Server also supports viewing on smartphones using Windows, iOS, or Android, and additionally any browser-enabled phone. And also, our Office Web App Server is optimized for touchscreens. But enough talking about this, let's go ahead and let's do it. Alright, so here I am. We're at a new server now. We haven't looked at this one before. This is GMOWA, GlobalMantic's Office Web App Server. And there's nothing on here except our server operating system, Windows Server 2012. And I know I mentioned it before, but I'm going to say it again because it is very important. You cannot install the following software on this Office Web App Server: Exchange, SharePoint, Link, SQL, or any version of Office, any desktop version of any of the Office programs. You cannot have any extra web services that use either port 80, 443, or 809, and it has to be installed on either Windows Server 2008 R2 or Windows Server 2012. And as I said, we have Windows Server 2012. So the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and download the Office Web App Server. So I've already got the page open here to the Microsoft Download Center, and I will show you the link in just a second. It's pretty straightforward. We simply have to go and click on Download. and I'm going to save it. And as you can see, it's got a little bit of time to go ahead and download. So before we pause, let me go back here and show you that it gives us a little bit of the overview and also system requirements. And here, as a tiny URL, is the link to that download page, or you can certainly go ahead and type in to Microsoft Download Center, the Office web apps. But if you want to just jot this down real fast, you can go ahead and take this as well. Now, it's going to take a few minutes, like I said, to download the Office web app server. So I will pause the recording here, and I'll be right back. And we're back. Our download has concluded. But before we go ahead and install our Office web app server, we're going to need to prepare this server. We're going to have to install some server roles and features, some very particular ones. And I want to show you this table, and this is from a Microsoft TechNet article, and I'm going to give you that link in just a second. But I want you to see that they're a little bit different. The prerequisites are a little bit different depending on whether you're using Server 2012 like we are, or Server 2008 R2. And the biggest difference, and what I really want to go ahead and point out to you, is that if you are using 2008 R2, you're going to have some additional downloads that you're going to have to do and install. So don't concern yourself with this list right now. We'll go through these one by one and check them off. But like I promised, let me go ahead and show you this link. And once again, I've given it to you as a tiny URL, so it's easier for you to go ahead and just jot it down if you want to go there. And once more, this is our list of roles that we are going to have to make sure that they are installed. All right, let's get back to our server. All right, we're back at our server, and let me open up the server manager for us. And we're going to go through and add those roles and features. So we'll click there, and this screen is just an informational screen, and we can even skip it if we need to come back. So I'm going to check that. We'll choose next, and it is a role-based or feature-based installation. Choose next. Select our server, and we only have one server listed here, so that's what we're going to do. We'll go ahead and select next, and let me slide this over. And through the magic of video editing and post-production, I will have our list of server roles and features next to us here. Now, as far as roles, the only one that we need right now is the web server. And notice that it includes the management tools. Now, there's going to be more checkboxes that we're going to have to tick off, but we're going to get to those in just a minute. As you can see, there's a lot more things on our list. So we're going to go ahead and select that and choose Add Features. So we'll add the features of the web server, the IIS. So let's go to the next. And now under Features, all the way at the bottom, I went a little too far here in my drop-down, I need to add the ink and handwriting services. All right, we will choose Next. This is just an informational screen telling you a little bit more about what IIS does. And now this is where we have to go ahead and really comb through that list and make sure that we have the right things selected. All right, under our web server role, we have common HTTP features selected. That's good. You'll notice we need default document and static content, and that's great. And if there are other things in here that are selected, we don't have to worry about unchecking those. They're fine. There are just certain ones that we have to make sure are checked. If they're done by default, just leave them alone. Like health and diagnostics, there's nothing in there we have to go ahead and worry about, so we'll keep moving down. Now notice at the bottom of my list on the left, it says the following services are recommended but not required. And under performance, it has static content compression and dynamic content compression. Well, they're not required, but why not check them? We're here. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that they are both checked, and you saw that dynamic content compression was not, so I went ahead and checked that one as well. Under security, we need request filtering, And if we go down, we also see that we require Windows authentication, and that is not checked. So we're going to go and check and make sure that that one is okay. Now, we need application development. So we're going to click there. And don't get fooled. We need to make sure that we expand that group and check a number of these in here. Our .NET extensibility 4.5, so we'll add that feature. The ASP.NET 4.5, we'll add those features. And when we did that, you'll notice that it also checked the ISAPI extensions, the ISAPI filters, but not the server-side includes, which we also need to go ahead and make sure is added. And that is everything that we need. Now, we of course needed our management console here, which, although at the top of our list on the left, is almost at the very bottom of our checkboxes here on the right. So that is all of our role services that we need to have checked. And there are no additional checkboxes that we will have to worry about in that feature of ink and handwriting services. So we can simply click on Next, and once again, we can scroll down through this list here and check and make sure that everything is okay. And I'm going to check to restart the destination server because it is going to want to restart. And I will click on Install. We'll wait till it gets going here until I can see that progress bar. I'm not sure anything's happening. There we go. Installation has been started. Okay, this is going to take a few minutes and it's going to take a restart. So we're going to pause our recording here again and we'll come back when it's done. And we're back, and as we can see, our features have been installed successfully, which is great. Our server has restarted, so we can close that and close that. And we're ready to go ahead and move along. Now, the next thing we need to do is go ahead and install the Office Web App Server. Remember, we downloaded that. Now we need to go ahead and install it. So we simply need to go to our Downloads folder, and there it is. And because I'm using Server 2012, I can simply double-click on it to open the ISO and double-click on Setup. If you were using Server 2008 R2, you would either have to extract it, or if you had another third-party software that could mount that ISO, you could do it that way. So we will accept the terms of agreement, hit Continue. We can relocate it if we want, but I'm perfectly fine with exactly where it is. And let it go. Now again, this is going to take a few minutes, so I'm going to pause here, and I'll return when it's done. And we're back. Our installation was successful. Now we need to go ahead and create the Office Web App Server farm. Now, we're only using our web apps internally. They're only going to be available to our GlobalMantics internal users. So we're not going to worry about certificates. We're not going to be dealing with SSL. To create the Web Apps Server farm, we need to use PowerShell. There's no other way to do it. And you can get the PowerShell commands on TechNet, of course, but I will also show you. You'll see them as I use them. So let's go ahead. Let's open up our Windows PowerShell. Remember to run as an administrator. And to save us the aggravation of typing, because if you've been watching this course by now, you realize that I'm not the best typist in the world. I have a little notepad here with my PowerShell commands right here. So we start with new Office Web App Farm, internal URL. And this is the parameter that we have to set. It is the internal URL for our server, gmowa.globalmantics.com. Now we're allowing HTTP because, like I said, this is internal, and we're also allowing editing enabled. That's so our users can edit those documents. Now, if we were using this with Lync or with Exchange, because remember I told you can also use the Office Web Apps with Lync and Exchange, you wouldn't need the editing enabled parameter. But this is what we need, so we're simply going to go ahead and copy that, paste it, hit enter, and we'll wait while it does its thing. It's always a good sign. I always feel with PowerShell when I hit enter and I don't get a lot of red text. If you've used PowerShell, you probably know what I'm talking about. All right, so now it's asking me, do I want to continue, because I have to make sure that I have the proper licensing, which I do. So I'm simply going to hit Y for yes and enter again. And there we go. Look at that. It's a beautiful thing. And that's it. That's all we had to do on this server. So we can go ahead, we can close this up. And we are going to check to make sure that the farm had been created by going to Internet Explorer, and we're going to type in that internal address. That was http gmowa dot globalmantics.com, followed by /hosting/discovery, and hit enter. And oh, look at that. That's a great thing. It's an XML file, and it is a WAPI discovery, NetZone, internal HTTP. This is great. Now, I can look at this and it doesn't mean anything to me because I'm not an XML guy, but I know that this means everything went the way it should, and our farm has been created. Awesome. So we can go ahead and close that, and we can actually get away from our server here, because now the next thing we need to do, and actually everything else we need to do, has to happen now on our SharePoint server. So let's go ahead and let's switch over to the SharePoint server. All right, we're here now on our SharePoint server because we're going to need to configure a few things here before we can go ahead and use our Office web apps. And we're going to start by getting out our SharePoint management shell, and we will choose to run as administrator, of course. I'm going to put this up here in the upper left corner, and I'm going to get out my documents library here, because I have all of my PowerShell commands, because everything we're going to do from this point on for this configuration is going to be done with PowerShell. It's the only way to do it. We don't have any other options. And like I told you before, I like to use the notepad to copy and paste those commands because it's, like I told you, I'm not the greatest typist. And two, I think it's a lot easier to see the text as black on the white background rather than white on the black background of our management shell here. Let's go ahead and let's get this going. The first thing that we need to do is create the binding between SharePoint 2013 and our Office web app server. Now, if you recall, I told you before, we're doing this internally. We're only making this available to our internal users. So we're using HTTP, not HTTPS. We're not using that SSL. And by default, SharePoint is going to try to communicate with the Office web app server using HTTPS. And of course, unless we tell it to use HTTP, that's going to fail. So we need to go ahead and tell it to allow using HTTP. So our first command is going to be this: new SharePoint WAPI binding, and then it's looking for the server name. So I will take this out and we will put in the FQDN of our Office web app server, which is gmowa dot globalmantics.com. Great. And then it ends with the command allow HTTP. So we will go ahead and copy that. We will paste it here, hit enter. Whoa, there you go. Did that very quickly, but it created all of our bindings. Well, this is a good sign. This means we know now that SharePoint is communicating with our Office web app server. So that is an excellent first step, and we're not going to save the changes. Now, like I've already said, remember, we're trying to communicate using HTTP, but our SharePoint is still using HTTPS. So what we want to do now is determine which internal zone our SharePoint is using. Now, by default, it's going to be using HTTPS. And we're going to go and check. We're going to run a command to check and make sure that that's the case. And if it is the case, we need to change it to HTTP. So we are going to run this command, which is simply get spwapi zone. So we will copy that, paste that, hit enter, and we will see, like I said, it is internal HTTPS. Okay, we know that that's the case, so now we need to change it to internal HTTP. And to do that, we'll use this command, set spwapi zone to internal HTTP. So we will copy that, we'll paste that, hit enter, and it didn't let us know really that anything happened. So once again, we're going to go ahead and view the zone with our get spwapi zone, just to make sure that it is internal HTTP. Awesome. Everything is going great. Now the last thing we need to do is to go ahead and change the allow OAuth over HTTP to true, because again, by default, it's going to be false. So we want to verify that that is the case. So we're going to go ahead and run this command, get SP security token service config, allow OAuth over HTTP. So let's paste this in here. And we see that it is set to false. Like I said, that's exactly what I expected it to come back. If it came back as true, everything would be fine. So now we have to change it to true. So we have to run a series of commands here. First is going to be this one, config, which will allow us to change it. Now we're going to change to true. Config allow OAuth over HTTP equals true. So we will paste that in, hit enter, and to check it again, we'll run the OAuth status. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and let's run the update, and then we will check our status. Config update. All right, now let's go ahead and check our OAuth status. And if everything went correctly, this should return value true, and it did. Perfect. Perfect, perfect. Everything is exactly what we want. All right, and that's it. We are done with our Office Web Apps. So we've installed the Office Web Apps server, on that GMOWA server, and we created the farm. Then we moved over here to SharePoint, and we did our configuration here so that SharePoint can use the Office Web Apps server, communicates just fine. And all we have to do now is go to a client machine, get to our SharePoint, and make sure that everything's working right. So hang in there with me while I switch over to a client machine. Okay, so we're back here at our GlobalMantics intranet site, and we're going to go right to the documents library. We're on our client machine, and you'll notice we have a number of different Office documents here. I have a Word, Excel, PowerPoint, all of which were Office Web Apps along with OneNote. And when we opened up an Excel document earlier, in an earlier lesson, we saw that we couldn't do anything but view it in the browser. We had no options to edit that document in the browser. We could open up Excel, which is installed on our desktop, and edit it there. But what if you're in a location where you don't have Excel installed? If you're using your SharePoint in a mobile location somewhere and the computer you're on doesn't have Excel or Word or PowerPoint or OneNote, whatever it is, well, the Office Web Apps are there for just that reason, so that you can go ahead and work on these things, these files, anywhere at any time. Now, let's go ahead, let's open one of these files up. We'll open up the customer file. And remember, like I said, we were only able to view the data. And when we went to our edit workbook, the only option that we had was a couple of things like being able to recalculate the sheet or editing in Excel, actually going ahead and opening up that desktop version of Excel and editing there. But we now have the option to edit in the Excel web app. So we're going to click there. And look at that. There's our Excel open in the browser with not every feature that we would have in the desktop version of Excel, but quite a few. You'll be able to do pretty much anything that you want. And notice we can go here, all the different tabs on our ribbon to see what exactly we have available to us. And of course, that's exactly the same with Word, PowerPoint, and OneNote. You're not going to get the full feature experience that you do with the desktop installation, but you're going to get a pretty good experience just the same. So there it is. Obviously, our Office web app installation went just fine, no problems at all. Let's go ahead, let's get back to our library here. And what the heck, let's take a look at the PowerPoint web app. Give that a few minutes to load up here. We also, again, same options. We can now edit with the web app. And now you can see again with PowerPoint, many of the same options, not the full experience, but pretty good. And let's look at the Word web app as well. So there you have it. The Office web apps. Well, that's it for this lesson, gang. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.